I have been warned by my family that the fact that this person is on our podcast, they are so lucky that while we're recording this, they are in school. Because if not, they would be banging down my stinking door. There's a new Warner Brothers animated film. As you know, on the podcast, we talk about these films. This is not a spoiler podcast. We're not going to start revealing all the endings and all the plot. We will talk about the film, but it comes out February 8th on 4K Blu-ray and all digital platforms. I've seen it. It's great. And we are pleased to welcome in. It's called Catwoman Hunted. A couple of weeks ago on the podcast, we had the writer of Catwoman Hunted, Greg Weisman, on, but I gushed because we got to talk about gargoyles for a little bit. Today, we have Catwoman herself. She's playing Catwoman for the first time, but you've seen her in other things. She's been in Dynasty. She's in a ton of shows. I'm not going to lie. I've seen Victorious 7,000 times in my house with two little daughters. Nonetheless, Elizabeth Gillies is here on the podcast, and she is extraordinary in the role. Elizabeth, thanks so much for doing this. Welcome to Slumming with a podcast like this.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
You've done voice work before. You did Winx Club. You've done voices.
Yeah.
What was this call like? You hear about Catwoman. Like, this is an iconic character that's been played in live action and animation for literally decades. What was your reaction when you find out about that?
I know. I mean, whenever you see the word Catwoman pop up in your email as like a subject line, you're like, what? So I opened it and I was so excited. I love animation. I've always loved animation. And this year alone, I did a couple different things, like animated wise. Even over the pandemic, I was lucky enough to be able to record from my home because we have a studio here. And I was so excited to
very fancy studio, by the way.
I mean, it's okay. It works. It's, I mean, studio at home is, it's not the same as going in. I recorded the movie in portions, and the first couple of times I went in, I got to have the whole experience, and then they needed stuff done over the pandemic. So it was like, I had to figure it out with a Source Connect in my house, but I was thrilled. I've loved Catwoman forever. I mean, we all grew up with our different version of Catwoman, and it's a character I've always loved and wanted to play. And I was absolutely thrilled. And then when I read the script and saw how fun it was and different, I was hooked.
It's very witty.
Very witty.
It's very witty. And there's a lot of lines that you weren't expecting. And, anybody who's seen Greg Weisman's work with Young Justice or anything that he's done, you can tell that it's that wit that is brought to it. I presume that you are recording. You said you recorded some of it by yourself, but all of it is solo. It's not the radio play like the old days where they, Batman, the animated series, they were all sitting in a room together playing off each other. Your chemistry with some of the other actors is pretty remarkable for having never really talked to them.
Thank you. Yeah, I was surprised because obviously that was something that I was concerned about too, because I'm just saying my lines. I'm not reading with anybody ever, not only in the room, but I'm actually just recording my dialogue alone. So once I saw the whole thing come together, I was like, oh, good. We all sound like we've met, which we haven't. So the chemistry was there. And that's because they really rounded a pretty fantastic cast. I was, lucky to get to work with some of these legendary people. It was very cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is a who's who in voice cast. Jonathan Banks, from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Yeah. I mean, Elizabeth knows, but I have, the audience. I don't make that assumption.
No, I mean, I was watching it with my husband when I got the cut, and we were making like predictions. We're like, wait, is that? Because I actually didn't. I knew who was playing. No, Stephanie was playing Batwoman. Right. I knew a couple of them, but we would hear voices and be like, and then we'd look it up and we were like, yeah, that's so cool.
That's pretty
he's
impressive.
Amazing, Jonathan Banks.
Jonathan Banks, Stephanie Beatrice, as you mentioned, she plays Batwoman. Keith David, the icon, Tobias Whale, Zara Fuzzle. Steve Bloom is also Solomon Grundy. Steve Bloom and Zara have been on this podcast before. So, it's great to see that it's a mix of stars, quote unquote, I'm using the air quotes there, stars, but also longtime voice people. And it brings that merging in together. One of the things about voice acting is there's so many different options, and you want star power, but you also want the quality, and you can see the qualities there.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. I cut out for a minute. I don't know if you heard me rambling to myself or
It was
not,
the
but
best question I'd ever asked. So no, I
I'm so
can't ask it.
sorry. I know that's what I could tell. That's why I
Yeah,
wanted
you
to
could tell
have
that
it. No, I
it
could
was the
tell you were
epitome
in
of
it.
broadcasting.
No, I came back and you were really in it. And I feel like I missed okay, one more time. I'm sorry. I'm back now. I think my computer was bad for a minute, but now I'm back.
No, I was just saying how it's incredible the depth of voice people that, veteran voice people who are primarily voice actors, but also people who do on-camera work that are coming into voice acting. And it's a hybrid of that. It's not one or the other.
It's so funny, right? I mean, people who do voice work. Okay, so I just had on Dynasty. We just had, I guess it's a spoiler, but it's really not. And I feel like maybe the worlds won't combine, so I'll be okay saying it. We had, what's his name? He plays Patrick on SpongeBob on the show, and I was thrilled because I grew up with it, and I was talking to him about animation and voiceover. And
must have made him feel like he's 100.
I mean, yeah, especially because I'm like pushing 30. It's probably not the best thing to hear. I was like, I remember when the first episode aired, I was just a kid. He's like, okay. But he was really cool. And I was talking about, it's just my point is when you are talking to people or listening to people that have done voiceover for like decades, it's just the skill they have is so honed and incredible. And it is more difficult when you're popping in, like doing your little voiceover moment from a, live action kind of world. But when I was being directed, I've been told this before when I do voiceover work, apparently they can tell when you're a singer and it's weirdly helpful. I don't know why. Or when you've done theater, I don't know. Like I think it lends, I think being a singer and being a theater performer lends itself well to voiceover is something that I heard and someone told me. I said 5 things and none of them connected with each other, but you have them all now.
Well, but the interesting part, you mentioned singing, and the really funny thing is, how iTunes tracks how many times you've listened to songs? I think your songs are listened on between all our devices in our family. Your songs are listened hundreds of times more. I worked with stinking Prince, and your songs are so over it. That and Meg from the movie Hercules are the most listened to songs from that. You mentioned SpongeBob, and it made me think about, no matter what you do, whether it's Catwoman or Dynasty or anything that you do, what about the throngs of people, like a generation of people that know you from Victorious? How do you escape that? And do you want to escape that?
No, I mean, now I'm older. I have an appreciation for it. When you're young and you're in it and you've done all the episodes and you're going out and everyone wants you to be that, and you're like that tender age of 17, 18, when you're like, I just want to shed it. I don't want to be this anymore. I want to be in it. I'm over that now. I'm like 30. I'm almost 30, and I think it's sweet. And I think it's amazing that it's transcended all these different generations, because our fans that were watching it live are around my age. So if you think about that, that's pretty, because I was about 15 when I was on the show, 16, 17. But it's just so crazy. I mean, I cannot believe how rabid the fan base still is. I think it coming to Netflix was a big part of that, because then they all got to watch it at their leisure and start over with it. And so how old are your daughters?
So at the time of this recording, because folks, if you're listening to this in the future, do us a favor, tell us how the flying car is, and let us know, because you never know when people listen to podcasts. But right now they're 13 and 10. So I would say, it's like, starting at 6, they found that thing. And when it went to Netflix, it was just on repeat. It was constant. And it was the graduation from Disney princesses. I never could get them into Star Wars. I've told this story on the podcast. There was a book that came out for little girls called Vader's Little Princess. And it was like a cartoon book of like teeny bopper things that Leia, being Vader's daughter. Yeah. And so my daughter at like 5 years old literally said, well, how could Darth Vader be a bad guy? He's such a good dad. I was like, okay, that's not going to work.
Oh my God. That's so much.
Right. And then it was the Fresh Beat Band, and then Victorious. And when Victorious happened, it jumped to another level. And I promise the podcast, this is not something I'd ever thought when I conceptualized this podcast that we'd ever talk about. But what I get a kick out of watching that show is knowing what happened to all of you, including
Right.
Ariana Grande,
Yeah,
and to
of
watch
course.
the dynamic then and to think what the dynamic was then. And if you knew what was happening in the future, how would the dynamic have changed? That fascinated me.
It's insane. I mean, she and I were like we were sharing a dressing room in East Haddam, Connecticut, on our first regional run of an off-Broadway show, you know what I mean? And we were just like getting pizza and talking about our dreams. And then we ended up working together for years and years and years after.
Sure.
And we've lived together. And I mean, she's one of my best friends. It is funny when we look back and see where everyone's ended up. It's a very impressive cast, and it was a very special time. But I've done almost 100 episodes of Dynasty now. And
Yep.
if I go in public, I am only Jade from Victorious. I've never worked
Seriously?
again. People ask me if I left show business. I'm like, I have done 100 episodes of a Netflix show, but they don't care.
That's incredible.
I'm Jade forever.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Question about, let's kind of steer it back to Catwoman.
Yes.
There's jazz music that plays throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
And when it was advertised, in social media and whatever, when the movie was advertised, the big talk about anime. Yes, it is an anime style, but to me, it's more about the music. The music is everywhere in it. And when you're recording, you don't know that, right?
No, I had no idea. I put it on and it starts and it's like this like jazz kind of noir interest. I was like, what is going on? And I loved it. I said, this is so fresh. This is so different because you're playing with a different animation style, but then you're sort of juxtaposing it with this super interesting jazz score. And I just found it to be very new and interesting. And I was down. I loved it. What a fun surprise.
And this isn't really a big spoiler thing, but Batwoman's in it. I mean,
yeah.
in case people didn't know.
Yeah.
but you don't find that out right away. It's hinted. And,
yes.
There's this little shadows and things like that. And I think that's really smart because some dummy is not going to have been on social media and they're going to see, that logo. And then they're going to be like, wait a minute, that's not Batman.
Right. Well, I think they expect, they think Catwoman, they expect Batman to show up because she's always either been in his shadow, ironically, or they've been together. They have that dynamic. They have a complicated relationship. And I think it's exciting when you see, no, actually it's Batwoman. And then you see how those two have their whole thing going on. And it's very fun.
Well, we've had this discussion on other episodes. For example, I'll use an example on when Supergirl came out. Right. Superman can be in it and it doesn't take away from her. Do you think Batman could have appeared in this movie and it wouldn't have taken away from either Catwoman or Batwoman for that matter?
He could have, but I think the characters are strong enough on their own, so he could have come in. But I like that he didn't. This is Catwoman's first animated feature, all her own. It's her time to kind of be front and center and tell her story and us kind of be living in her narrative. And if we're going to have somebody to her right or to her left or working alongside her, let it be Batwoman. Let it be another girl. I think it's a fresh take. I think it's fun. And I like that it's female driven. And we didn't miss him, like you remember she brings him up a couple times and you're like, oh, right. Batman, fun. That would be fun. But you're enjoying the movie. You're not thinking like, I can't watch this without Batman in it. And that's, I think, the point of her having her own story to tell in her own movie.
Well, and this is not really spoiler, but at one point someone calls her Cat and she says, you can't call me that. Only he calls me that. And it's, you just say he.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Doesn't even say his name. Yeah, totally. I think it's cool. I loved it. I none of that was lost on me. And I thought that was very fun. And she has her little buttons and trigger points when it comes to him, but she wasn't going to use his name. And I think women do that,
Well, and the other line that you sell, the only he calls me Cat, but the other line that you sell, and again, this is not spoilery in any way, is always lands on her feet. And it's such a cliche and you kind of mock it. Right. And that's phenomenal.
I like it. Yeah. She goes to say it. And then, Batman's like, shut the fuck up. Like, we got it. Yep. We get the gag. We get it. And I like it. That's like, that has that self-awareness and a little bit of camp. And that's everything I love. So, yeah.
All right. One thing on the performance.
Yeah.
Catwoman literally gets the crap beat out of her. Mm-hmm. You've done voice stuff before.
Yeah.
I would imagine. Well, did you record all the grunts in your home studio? No, I'm just kidding. Like, how much is that? Like, tell me about that part of the craft.
It's a lot. And I do think that's where they mean singers have an easier time because voice actors and singers, by the way, like I haven't like called myself a singer since I was on Broadway or recording an album, because otherwise I'm just ruining my voice every day.
Well, you were a singer yesterday when I found out you were coming on the podcast.
You know what I mean, though? Like if I'm not recording something or I'm not on Broadway, or when you're doing all those grunts and all those violent sounds for very long periods of time, sometimes back to back, it helps to know how to breathe and how not to throw out your voice. And I wasn't in the best voice that week when I was doing it, but I was reminded of how exhausting it is. I felt like I had been in a fight towards the end of it, because it's a lot, you know. I don't remember if we put it first or last. I don't remember what the trick is, but we did it either first or last. You make a point to do all the really hard stuff either up front or
interesting
at the end. Yeah.
She literally gets the crap kicked out of her.
She really, I know, it's like ridiculous. She does some cool stuff too, but she really gets taken. She gets, beaten pretty good.
All right. Well, since you're aware of the craft, there is one scene, I think it's Grundy. Again, I'm not trying to spoil her. She's squeezed. Like they're literally trying to crush her to death.
Yeah.
So what's the direction there? Like, what is the voice people? What are they saying to you?
Maybe because I swear, I think being on Nickelodeon helped me, because you have to do so many weird things. And like, we have to, I mean, when I look back, I mean, you've seen shows. It's like, we had to just do, it is a sitcom, like any sitcom, but there's also that kid element where you have to make it extreme, or it's like the old Home Alone rule where people can have like their heads chopped off and somehow they're back in 5 seconds and everything's fine. So I've had to I weirdly understood what to do the whole time. And because I'd done voiceover, I mean, although, you know, the show I was on when I was a kid, Wings Club, was certainly not violent in any sort of way.
I don't think Wings Club, I don't think they ever squeezed them like that.
No, I just I did my best. Yeah. Hopefully it came off squeezy.
What about, you know, we mentioned the iconic role of Catwoman when you were growing up, or, you know, pre-Victorious, let's do that. Were you big into superheroes? Was that not your thing? There's literally no right answer, because every time we
there
ask
is
that
a
question,
wrong answer, though. I'm going to give you the wrong answers. Okay. The Batman I grew up with, it's the wrong answer. No one's gonna watch the movie if I say this, but I'm gonna go for it. The Batman I grew up with and loved was the George Clooney Batman.
Oh my God.
I know. And like that, like Schwarzenegger. And anyway, the reason I loved it was Uma Thurman. I was obsessed with Poison Ivy. I was like, whatever this is what I want to be. And my parents were like, I don't know what that means. That's not good. But that sort of kind of got me interested in learning more about this whole world. And then Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman I loved it so much. And I thought she was so cool. I also just love Michelle Pfeiffer. I was weirdly watching like What Lies Beneath at a very young age, and all these movies I shouldn't have been watching. So anyway, I love Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. And then when I went on to do this, I refreshed myself with, like, you know, Julie Newmar and Eartha Kitt and all those kind of classic, and everyone played it really differently, and everyone kind of really did their own thing with it. I feel like it was only, but then there was the 90s series too.
Batman,
where she was really and she was really great. I sort of kind of tried to take all of them into account and then do my own thing with it. But because of the noir tone, I did sort of add like a Mae West element that I just felt like doing. So I don't know.
Well, it's just funny. There's all kinds of perspectives, you know, when everybody is of different ages.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's not, you know, Julie Newmar is not the definitive Catwoman.
No, and when I was doing interviews with a bunch of different, you know, this is a new territory for me when I'm doing all these interviews, because these are devout comic book fans and DC fans. And I said Michelle Pfeiffer, and people would roll their eyes. And I'm like, you can roll your eyes, but it's a really good Catwoman. It is the Catwoman I grew up with. So they're like, what about Julie Newmar? I'm like, first of all, she only did a few. That's the truth. She was replaced very quickly, and she was amazing. But you know, I understand I don't know if there's a right and wrong answer. I feel like everyone's got their own person that they sort of latched onto. Well, I love Eartha Kitt, but I'm not doing an Eartha Kitt voice. Like that would have been really, really bad.
No, I wouldn't even want you to imitate that.
No, I'm not going to. So
there was a Joel Schumacher who directed that Batman movie, passed away recently, and there was a rumor, and it's this big internet rumor, that there is a 3-hour version of the Val Kilmer one. Wow. Not the George Clooney, but the
no, that's Val okay. Kilmer. I understand why there's not a
and like release that, like get that on one streaming, put that on HBO Max, because I think people would have a blast with that kind of stuff.
Totally. Oh, there's no cut long enough. I mean, for people who love something, they'll watch it's like Get Back. It's like, did you watch the Beatles thing? Like I sat there and I would have watched 10 more episodes. And then people who don't love the Beatles came in and they're like, they're just sitting there. And I'm like, I know, isn't it amazing?
Well, that's been my argument in sports. My primary job, I cover sports, and baseball games are too long. And I said, but it's not length, it's pace.
Right.
Because when people saw Avengers, no one said at the end of Avengers, God, that's a 3-hour movie.
Right.
They said, wait, can it be 4 hours, 5 hours?
Right.
If it's good, it's good. And you can tell when something's good. What is your attitude? You have a boatload of followers on social media.
Yeah.
What is your attitude about social media in promoting stuff that you're working on, yet staying out of the toxicity that exists in it?
Don't ever share your feelings unless they're funny. I don't log on and say like, I'm having a hard day. This happened, that happened. I think the more you let people into your personal private life, the more you're opening yourself up to people's opinions on that and people kind of invading your personal space. I've always loved the internet and I've loved social media for the fans being the fans of the thing you're trying to promote. I love it for fan art. I love it for the content they create and the amazing opinions they have about what I'm on there for in the first place. I think when you start to just like open your heart on social media or share your controversial beliefs, it just goes downhill really fast. So I have a healthy, distant yet very engaged relationship with social media, and I think my fans get that. And I'm lucky. I joined Twitter like the year it came out. I was forced to by Nickelodeon, and Instagram they forced me on there too because I'm a really private person. But I found a way to create a persona that doesn't invade my own life that really satisfies them and is still true. So yeah, I figure it out. I manage it. It can be very bad.
It's really wonderful. Well, because I do say usually if there's anything in this episode that you heard that you have an issue with, do me a favor, reach out to her directly, but she's not going to respond to it. So don't even bother.
No, I mean, like, I really like, so I'm really sort of like, I find myself going back to Twitter a lot because no one is gaining Twitter followers anymore. Twitter is at saturation. I think it's like, it's not new. It's everyone who has a Twitter. So it's like this smaller number, and it's like the same people I've seen for the last 10, 11 years. And it's kind of fun. I like it for that reason. Instagram it's gotten a little out of hand. It's a lot of people. It's like 14 million people or something. It's a little too much, but it's all good. You just gotta be careful. Yeah,
it's pretty wild. Well, congratulations again. The digital 4K Blu-ray, the thing comes out February 8th. It's called Catwoman Hunted. It's hysterical. I really appreciate it. Congratulations on the project.
Thank you.
And we look forward to talking to you again, welcoming you back to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Tell your daughters hi for me.
I will do that indeed. We have to definitely connect again. That is Elizabeth Gillies. She is Catwoman in the new Warner Brothers DC Universe film.